Is it official? Okay, so we're going to get started. Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Zoning Commission. Today's date is June 27th and the time is 6 p.m. By now, tonight's meeting will be audio taped and minutes will be prepared. In respect to all those parties, we ask those present turn off cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet upon the front table. I would like to take a moment to review the procedures the commission will follow tonight. First, the commission will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items, and for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. The planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendation. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you'd like to speak either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please first state your name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with your comments at all times. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicant may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the commission. The commission shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the commission. The commission will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any commission member who has an ex parte communication to place in this record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of the deliberation of the respective agenda item. Okay, so call to order our roll call. Do we do roll call?
Just let the record reflect the 4 members who are here.
Okay. Let the record reflect that the 4 members are here, but Tom Bright is absent. Number 3 on the agenda is public comment and matters not on the agenda. Got anything? Okay, I'm seeing no. Number 4 is approval of the minutes of May 23rd, 2022 and June 1st, 2022. We have a motion to approve. Do we have any corrections or comments? If not, I'd entertain a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda is item number 5, public hearing of Williams 3rd Strike First Edition minor subdivision proposal. Dan, do you want to read the information into the record for us, please?
Yes. Lee Mark Williams has filed a 1-lot minor subdivision on the property referenced as parcel number 894602300004. The purpose is to split the house from the parcel and retain the remaining portion of the property for its agricultural purposes. The proposal has been properly noticed in the Sioux City Journal's legal section on June 10th, 2022. The neighbors within 1,000 feet have been duly notified via June 10th, 2022 letter about tonight's meeting, June 22nd, 2022. The Zoning Commission public hearing. Appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, and organizations have been notified and been requested to comment. The Woodbury County engineer did find this proposal in compliance with Iowa code closure requirements and found that the lots have adequate access with a shared driveway. Extraterritorial review as required by Iowa code 354.9 was not required, as this property is further than 2 miles from an incorporated jurisdiction. The property is not located in the floodplain. The proposed lot contains the septic system, and the well is located on an abutting lot to the west where an easement agreement for access will be required. I will stop there and state that before the board in front of you, I provided a document that has 2 items. The first page is a consent to plating, which I'll explain after a while. And the second is the well easement and maintenance agreement that they will be required to record, coinciding with the final plat. And the applicant, or Dan Kreiner, that's supporting the applicant through the process, has showed me actually we have a signed version of the document actually with you this evening. So that requirement is on the process of being met. Based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance, this proposal does meet the minimum requirements for approval. As we said before that agreement was provided, it is the recommendation of staff to approve the proposal. Of course, with the condition that that easement agreement be recorded for the continued access, use, and maintenance of the well servicing lot 1 from the abutting property. The second document that was provided to you on the top is actually called a consent to platting. This is typically on the plat, but it's provided separately. And the recorder's office will basically include this as a second page. But anytime you have a mortgage or a situation and you're going through a subdivision process, the bank does have to sign off on that. So we're including this in the record as part of the entire plat situation that would ultimately go before the Board of Supervisors, but just wanted to introduce that into the record as saying that that will be part of the platting process and must be recorded along with the plat. Typically, the recorder's office takes a second page to that plat and will paste it right on there as they go through that process. With that said, that's all I have at this point.
Do you have any comments or clarification or anything from the applicant or representative at this time?
You don't have any questions?
Back to the commissioners. Anybody have any questions of our applicant? Hearing none.
Is the well only for the house? I mean, is there other?
No, Mark's got, they've got a patch for the cattle on the other side. The easement was set up to, at some point, control water to apply, and the house person was to water. Let the easement.
If the well goes bad and has to be replaced, it's.
Then it's both parties will split it out.
Other questions or comments of the applicant? Or no other questions or comments, or entertain a motion to go into closed session? Okay, good second. All in favor, say aye. Okay. Do you have any further discussion now that we're in closed session?
So we close the public hearing. Now we're in.
We have no other comments or concerns, questions for our applicants, then we can move on to a motion. Okay. We're ready for a motion. Someone would like to chime up. Now, whose turn is it?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, do you want to be specific or just leave it at that?
There's a suggested motion down here.
Yeah.
Suggested
On
motion
page 5.
There we go. Motion
by staff.
to recommend the approval of Williams Third Strike First Edition. Condition that the easement agreement. Both of those? Or is it
The easement agreement specifically, the consent to the plat is already required to be part of the recording of the plat.
the easement agreement for maintenance of the well? Servicing the abutting property.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. We have a second. Okay. No other comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hold same sign. Okay, motion carried. You got it. There you go, gentlemen. Thank you for coming tonight. Dan will take care of all your paperwork. At his convenience, of course. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is informational discussion of conditional use permit process for Berry County zoning ordinance. I take it that's you, Dan.
Yeah, I basically just wanted to be very brief and just talk a bit more about, we have all the different functions in the zoning ordinance, and conditional use is kind of a big one. It's our big kind of catch-all based on all the different aspects of the land use summary table. And when I've been looking very carefully through the ordinance, I know we've talked about solar, there's all sorts of multitude of issues that could face this county when we go down through a series of utilities or series of sales-based uses, et cetera, that would be reviewed by the commission and ultimately approved by the Board of Adjustment. And what I wanted to bring up is we present criteria quite frequently, where we have the 6 criteria, and they all root back directly into the ordinance and into Iowa code. Basically, the responsibility is you're basically like to regulate public health and safety and all of those things legally root back into there. And when we prepare staff reports, what we try to do is look at the big scope in terms of those respective criteria. How will the neighbors and the public in general, Woodbury County, be affected by these respective projects? And based on that criteria, what are reasonable things that we can move into the criteria if we have to regulate? And the issue sometimes with conditional use, and the reason I bring this up is we're given guidance sometimes, and we're not given guidance other times. In particular, telecommunication towers kind of have a bit of a framework to work through there that we oftentimes associate with the criteria. But if someone else comes in and we look at maybe like alcohol, looking at alcohol, we have to kind of look through criteria there, like alcohol in a restaurant. What are those things of safety that we should consider when we bring that up? We run it through. We look at location. We look at what the stakeholders have to say. We reason out a criteria, a recommendation that goes to the Board of Adjustment. So it's sort of a major research project on an issue by issue basis. And when we look at specifically at times are there areas where we might need an ordinance or an area where we might need backing in terms to either support a conditional use or to do something separately than conditional use. And the reason I bring this up again is because I think sometimes it's very easy for the public to look at that application or look at that form and start filling out the answers. And when folks do start contacting me, you'll see things right there that the public is not used to. What is the general plan? The general plan of the county, of course, is that basis for the ordinance. Well, does that proposal make sense with the general plan? Or is it contrary to what the public, the landowners were looking for at that respective time? That's one of the top questions that we are asked, and we root it into the criteria right away. And then when we look directly at the ordinance, then with the follow-up questions, is the area safe? Does it have a driveway access? And we can basically branch off depending on what type of issue there is. And I think overall, the last several years, and I know historically between my time, I think that the boards do a good job in terms of going through and analyzing and presenting an ultimate recommendation. So we do staff reports. The commission can definitely add to or look at things that are reasonable, deliver that information over to the Board of Adjustment, et cetera. And so I guess what I'm getting at is when we do that, there may be times that we want to maybe link directly more to the criteria. If we come up to an idea that, hey, this criteria, this idea that we need to regulate has to be based in this criteria. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up is because if we bring it to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment looks at the criteria, and maybe you suggest a set of conditions or maybe a set of limitations that might be on a respective applicant, there's always the chance that something could end up in district court if somebody disagrees with how a particular conditional use is looked at. And so any kind of decision would have to be directly related to that criteria in a way that can be fully explained and elaborated on. And I know when it gets to the Board of Adjustment, that pretty much, they actually will have a public hearing. They'll look at the material, they'll close the session, and they can decide that night if they're going to approve it, or they can take some time, I think up to a 35-day time period to carefully analyze and look at what that criteria is. But if the applicant on the other end of the case basically don't, care for the result of what came with the Board of Adjustment, maybe they had a problem with a condition of some sort and did take it up to court, the court would definitely scrutinize every step. Basically, how did this criteria come out, or this condition come out of that criteria? So I just simply wanted to use this agenda item to kind of just help us all kind of think a bit more in terms of if we did identify something, let's just say at the meeting where we've got to really take action and look at this criteria, we'd have to really carefully kind of scrutinize it and come up with it and have that be a part of a zoning commission response or a statement to the Board of Adjustment. If they intend to adopt it or bring a part of it, then it's just got to kind of follow through that clean route. That's the way it is designed when you don't have the direct ordinance for the teeth, basically, what folks are looking for. So we may see, things in the future where folks say, hey, you might need an ordinance here, you might not need an ordinance here, but I think generally the way that zoning ordinance was designed, we weren't able to foresee the future on everything. And so it's a matter of how do you address it at the time with the best information as possible. So that's simply what I wanted to put out there today.
Have we had any that have been worked out?
Since I've been here, I haven't seen it. Have you seen?
We've had some that came close.
Like, I was on the Board of Adjustments for 12 years, and not once did we take beyond that night to decide anything. So they
No,
decided that
usually
night.
it's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there had been some case, or are they asking for us to, has the Board of Adjustments asked us to be more clear on anything? Or
Not at all.
You're just kind of being preventive?
I'm looking at, when I bring up other items, I basically say, hey, maybe we need to look at this or this issue as a whole. Sometimes my concern would be, depending on the complexity or the intensity of what the case is, we do have room with zoning ordinance to facilitate much of these issues. The question is, when we do decide what a specific case is, what a specific criteria is, I'm just kind of putting it out there because I started thinking, and I talked to various folks, various stakeholders all the time, and including going back to our training sessions that we've had where they kind of lay out what a conditional use is, what a variance is and everything. One of the key parts is always kind of documentation and looking very carefully. You can look carefully at precedents, what things have been done in the past, but there's also uniqueness to the situation of where something is proposed. And so I'm just simply bringing it up, and I'll probably talk to the Board of Adjustment when they get agenda items too on these type of respective items.
Right. I think in the past, we've always been very good at scrutinizing those 6 items when it comes to something that could be contentious. Yes.
And
Things that are kind of cut and dried and black and white. It's like, okay, yeah, we all agree. Otherwise, we bring it up and talk about it.
And I've been doing, I read that ordinance so much that when you read into the conditional use, and you sit there and go, oh, we have language on telecommunication towers, but we have our multiple page land use summary table. So we decided to elaborate on this one. And it's just, where do we choose to elaborate on further issues concerning these respective projects?
Do you find though that if you get too detailed on the elaboration of certain items that you can paint yourself in a corner?
I do think that is a possibility, depending on the wording. That's definitely a valid point. And so going back to the tradition and how things have been in the past, following some sort of criteria or policy usually is good policy. It's consistency. The public expects consistency in many of these zoning situations as a whole. But going back to, we look at telecommunication where we have so many issues, federal regulations on what a local entity can and cannot do. I think at times that some of that does need to be laid out, at least for showing you where you can and cannot operate.
Right, yeah, I think we need to refer back to anything that supersedes our information by any means, our rules and regulations.
But yeah, we see things kind of ebb and flow quite a bit, especially this season, and the legislature pretty much gets done and they put new things. It kind of surprised us with ag exemption a few years ago.
Kind of the nature of technology as well dictates which areas get, you know, for cell phones, there wasn't the big push of the towers and now the solar and the wind and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely the demand with the public following the demand. And as we think, you've said before, Chris, about where you kind of get the county's attention after something happens so many times and you start to look and see, do you need a policy change?
Right. Right, or how soon is that policy going to change anyway? Do you want to put something in writing? You have to weigh the options.
So yeah, so there's kind of just that where, yeah, flexibility versus what might need to be enumerated.
Yeah, consistency. If people are looking for consistency, it just sometimes it's not going to work.
And so to be clear, whatever condition is put into a Board of Adjustment resolution does in a sense become the same similar force to what an ordinance is basically. So that's where the district courts would carefully look at, can you hold them to that condition? Is it fit well with the criteria, or is there a hold?
Right, and I know in the past too, we've used, you know, we've been able to compare different situations that were similar, but because of the uniqueness of the application, you can't always say, oh, well, we did it like this with that one. We need to do it like this for this one. So it makes it a unique situation in itself. It doesn't set precedents. And that's one thing that they've always said, this will not set precedents because you look at each item individually. So as long as the public knows that too, then that kind of helps justify our actions a little bit.
Absolutely, and when we get an applicant, I'll try to talk, we usually get an application, then talk to the applicants a bit more about what that process entails as a whole, so that they really understand that it is up to the commission and the Board of Adjustment to come up with, you know, a reasonable, does this fit, does this not fit, and ultimately it's the decisions, of course, of the boards, the policymakers, et cetera, to look at this. That's pretty much all I've got there.
Perfect.
We want to comment on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item number 6, a public comment on matters not on the agenda. Do we have anything, anybody on the telephone? No. Okay. So I'm seeing absolutely nothing on that again. So item number 7 is commissioner comment or inquiry. Oh, we have a comment from a commissioner or inquiry. A cheekish one.
I have those more comments too. I was going to ask about building permits for the shops and houses that are being built together.
The shelves.
Shelves and the hops and the things, bargain and dance.
Unique names.
Yes, this has already been answered and asked and answered in my behind the 8 ball, or is this something that we need to be talking about?
Well, one thing about rural Woodbury County is we do not have building codes like the city would, so we don't get into the specifics like electrical and all that stuff reverts up to the state fire marshal's office to ensure that they have the proper electrical inspections. And what the ordinance does when it comes to houses or those type of places is that our minimum dimension on a single family dwelling is 23 feet by 23 feet. So if you exceed that 23 feet, you get yourself a building permit for a principal single family dwelling, and that's enough according to what the regulations are in this respective ordinance.
And Iowa code. So does Iowa code have anything different than what we have at this point?
We follow basically the law in terms of not having the building codes in place. The manufactured and some of those pre-built, they made really clear several years ago to put in Iowa code that you can't treat some of those items any different other than that you have to have a solid foundation. You have to have them fully mounted and capable as a permanent structure. But that's kind of the general how the county has operated, at least over the last several years, at least under this ordinance.
Do you know anything about the marketability of those houses? I mean, have we had a number of them? I've noticed them in the county.
There's several in there.
Yeah.
They're substantial. Yeah, as far as value goes.
As long as they are equipped to facilitate a family and they're called a family and they have the amenities of the dwelling, the living quarters, the kitchen, the plumbing, etc.
You can't have a shop between the house and the road, is that?
The standard is that the principal structure must be in front. The front wall of the house must be closer to the road unless you double the setback. And so if you have a 200-foot setback and your house is all the way 200 foot, let's see, your house, we've drawn this out. We've drawn pictures to try to help us. The house can be, or excuse me, a shop can be in front if it's got a setback. So if you have a very deep lot, it can be 200 feet. There's the shed, and then there's the house. If you look at shorter setbacks like AE, which is 75, then double that to 150. But otherwise, in normal circumstance, the shed has to be behind the front wall of the house.
That was one of the most popular issues with adjustments.
Really?
Sheds in the front yard. Asking
Oh,
for variances, especially backyard, it wasn't set up to give us a steep drop off, and the only place to put it was in the front yard.
right. Or, yeah, like you said, it's the grading. So they have to put the house back in the back of the lot. So now they have another structure. I remember those.
Yeah, and that is a common theme.
Uh-huh.
The shed can't be built before the house.
Right. All kinds of good rules and regulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool, okay. Anybody else? Staff update?
Let's see. You may have heard kind of in the media, I think it's kind of on Facebook, that RAGBRAI is coming through here. And much of our properties out there, route is gonna go from Sergeant Bluff through Bronson, go to Hampton, and it work its way down to Ida County, Ida Grove. And kind of there were a few zoning issues where commercial, an enterprise like a vendor technically don't meet the zoning in terms of setting it up even on a temporary basis. In particular, the sales of alcohol, even in the regular zoning area of procedure, alcohol must go through commission and the Board of Adjustment, even in the commercial districts for review, and then get approved by the auditor's office for the license, and ultimately the supervisors vote on it. We're kind of a separate issue there. So we've had requests that we've said, oh, you can't sell the alcohol, basically. And if you look at the way the ordinance can really lock down even the sales of food and beverage across the board there. But technically, private property owners do have the right to do free will donations. Those scenarios where you could technically go out and suggest a donation, bottled water, $1.50, that type of thing. But so commercial sales is kind of what the ordinance basically is when it comes to that. So that's
Thanks for
kind
the tip.
you might do some. So that's kind of the staff update.
I'm not on the route.
There goes your bar idea.
No, don't be spreading rumors like that.
But the ordinance in itself, if for an enterprise, it doesn't have clear temporary provisions when it comes to a specific use that starts and shuts off within a reasonable time. The closest area that I saw the word temporary in there is right before the table of land use. It references principal use, conditional use, accessory use, and prohibited use. But you don't see any temporary uses in the table. But the language before the table does say prohibited or temporary. So I've kind of wondered about that intent, where they have the word temporary, but no further explanation. So
Maybe try, right, bring up something that could be problematic.
that's all I got.
All we've got, okay, so that means we're to the point of number 9, which is adjournment.
I'm making a motion.
Jumped right in there. Good job.
Second.
Second, we've got a second. All in favor, say aye. Okay, motion carried. We are adjourned.